Thank you so much. I'm hearing an echo. I'm so sorry I'm not there. The whole reason I said I would do something was because I wanted to be there and hear what everybody else is doing. But I've been doing too much traveling and I just couldn't do that one extra flight. Can you folks hear me okay? Because I hear an echo on my part.
Yeah.
Yes.
No echo here, sorry.
Okay, good. I'm going to do something I always tell my students never to do, which is to apologize before I speak. This is not an area I've worked in, and I have put together some thoughts in the time I've had, which recently hasn't been very much time at all. I hope I can add something to the discussion, and so here it is. Our hosts, Max Harris and Philip Kevitt, write in their Politics of Love that for them, love is a sentiment of enduring warmth towards a person. I'm going to have to call you back. This is driving me nuts.
Sure thing.
All right. Yeah.
No.
It's hard for me to read and hear this thing in my head.
Okay, no worries. We'll call you back in 1 second.
Let me call you. Let me try calling you. Okay.
Sure thing.
Because you have everything set up there. So just retry.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. I should have done it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to try to mute things at our end and see if that's any better.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes. Hopefully it's better now. Okay.
All right, it is. It's much better. Okay. They write that love to them is a sentiment of enduring warmth towards a person or people, which shows deep concern for them. It can be expressed in different ways. For example, through action or words, through words or action. It is closely connected to kindness, generosity, and commitment. I want to make the entirely unoriginal suggestion that it is perhaps most closely connected with care. Care involves a concern for others, which is expressed through a disposition to act to benefit another for another's sake when the occasion arises. I confess to not having thought deeply about love, though honestly, is there anyone who hasn't pondered the nature of love? As a scholar, however, care rather than love has been my concern. And as I will suggest at the end, care is essential to love, particularly if we're talking about a politics of love. Love, however, is not essential to care. We can and do care for others whom we do not love, or even when we do love the one for whom we care, we may not feel lovingly at times when the person needs care. Still, there's a touch of love in all care that is worthy of the name. I entitled my own book, that's now almost 20 years old, Love's Labor, my book about care, Love's Labor, in part because people so often speak about caring as a labor of love, and in part because where love requires labor, it is the labor of caring that is called for. I'm going to throw out some thoughts about the relationship between love and care. Something, by the way, which I'm often asked about, before I venture to say anything, however half-baked it may be at this point, about the politics of love. When we speak of care as a labor of love, what do we mean? And I think we have to make a few distinctions. We have to distinguish between love for a particular individual love for a group of beings, biological or social, love for humanity as a whole, love for a certain kind of creature, let's say dogs, cats, large beasts, cuddly ones. But perhaps as far as its relation to care is concerned, the most pertinent distinction may be between love for a particular other or for a generalized other. And I'll be using that distinction throughout. I don't know if I have to say more about a generalized other, but you can ask me during questions. Another important distinction I need to bring in at the start is the distinction between care as a sentiment, which pertains to an individual, and care as an action, which is always, I suggest, relational in nature. And one more essential distinction, and that is between care as we use it descriptively, that is to say, the sorts of things we generally call care, and care in a normative sense, that is, care when it's carried out as it ought to be carried out, and not necessarily as it is being carried out. How should ought be carried out? How should care be carried out? That depends on the point of care, and the point of care, either, is to benefit another for the other's own sake, or, in other terms, to help a person flourish. When we do the work of care, our caring is generally directed at a particular other, sometimes at several particular others. Another way to put this is to say that care, understood now as the activity of care or care work, is directed at concrete others, not generalized others. While care cannot be directed at a generalized other, we can say that a fully normative sense of care involves something that I call caring about care. That is, if we consider care to be an indisputable good, a good such that it's worthwhile for us to direct our attention away from our own well-being to that of another who needs care, then I think we're taking it to be a value of supreme importance. Now, if it's a value of supreme importance, then it is good not only for the one for whom I care, but it is good for all. And this is important if we want to work towards a politics of care, or a politics of love, since a politics needs to attend to the well-being not only of the particular other, the concrete other, but also the generalized other. If caring involves the exploitation or domination of either the carer or the cared for, or if in caring for someone I make it more difficult or impossible for others to care for those who they are in a position to care for, those who need care, then I fail to care about care. And what I am doing, I suggest, is not care in its fully normative sense. For example, if I devote myself to a tyrant or a torturer who works to undermine the possibility of care of others, my ministrations are not care in a fully normative sense, because I undermine the value of care as such, that is, care as it is a value to all. Thus, a fully normative care in the fully normative sense should not be exploitative nor dominating, and it is care that is fully respectful of the good of the cared for as the cared for sees it. So on my account of care and respect are always joined. Care is not opposed to respect. Unlike some accounts like Darwin's. Clearly, we call many things care that fall short of these demands. But when we call something good care, we generally have in mind something that adheres to these requirements. Care in its fully normative sense, care as it ought to be, is concerned then with another's flourishing and is accompanied by a disposition to do what is needed to contribute to that flourishing when we are called upon to do so. Concern for another's flourishing is a moral attitude, one that is other-directed. And while it is impossible to care for all, we can work to see that all are cared for. In its other-directedness, care has a positive affect, a positive intent toward the other, and a sense of connectedness to another. In these regards, care and love are twins. They're born from the same impulse, nourished in the same womb. But the two are not identical twins. They're fraternal twins, let's say. They come into being at the same moment, but they could have come into being separately. While care is about doing something for another, born of concern for the well-being of another, love, too, inspires concern for the other. But love is distinguished by another affect. This is not one that is mentioned in that first quote, but I think one that's very important, and that is an attraction to another, a strong, sometimes overwhelming emotion that can override objective evaluation of the other's nature, character, needs, and wants. Care cannot lose its objective valuation of another's characteristics, of another's needs and wants, because if it fails to see the other as he or she is, the carer will fail to respond to what it is that the other actually requires. While love will harness our perceptions and reasonings to its own end, care must divorce itself from such affective override of our reasoning and our perceptions, for it would fail to achieve its end to help another flourish. People often think that a mother's love, for example, this is an example of this, people often think that a mother's love for her child will cause her to fail to see her child objectively. But such a mother, as a carer, must see her child objectively, or she'll not be an effective carer. Still, loosening the boundaries of the self, the sense that the other and myself are bound together, and that I can penetrate the other's thoughts and needs, are features of both love and care. So, like fraternal twins who are on good terms, care and love can be very helpful to one another. They can aid one another in achieving their ends. Caring for another can be hard work, often requiring putting the other's urgent needs before our own. The force of a positive attraction to another, a force strong enough to break down the barriers between self and other, to bind our needs to the fulfillment of another's future needs, to the fulfillment of another's needs that requires that we identify with loving another. And this kind of identification, this kind of loving identification, usually accompanies care. Here there's a difference between short-term care and long-term care. Short-term care does not require such an attachment. The latter, whereas long-term care begins with or results in such an attachment, generally speaking, not always. Short-term care requires a commitment to the value of care in general and for the individual in need of care in particular. But although short-term care requires attention to the particular other, it does not necessarily need a commitment to the particular other, only to the generalized other who needs care that I can provide. Long-term care, however, is often undertaken as a labor of love by the one who has a strong attraction and attachment to the particular other. Where long-term care is carried on by a stranger for pay, say, such love, or at least some strong positive attachment, frequently develops as the relationship continues. And I believe this is because good care is difficult to sustain in the absence of the strong attachment characteristic of love. When we examine what care requires of the carer, I think we can understand why this is so. Care requires that we defer fulfillment of our own needs as we attend to those of another. The need to do so for pay that we receive when we're employed to care for a stranger can sustain us as we continue to defer our various needs, but only for so long. If one has a commitment to care, such deferment, if brief, is generally acceptable. It's short pain for the gain of living out our ideals, our vision of ourselves as good, confident, and caring. But long-term care involves an indefinite deferment of our own needs, our own interests, as these exist outside the care relationship. It can involve difficult physical and emotional labor, sometimes without a reciprocal engagement of the other. Often we can't even be sure if what we are doing is caring or sufficiently caring, if we may inadvertently be harming rather than helping. Sustaining the care through the long term also involves careful attention to the particularity of the individual we care for. As we come to know the person in all their particularity, their quirks, their gifts, their moments of generosity, or even their weaknesses, we are more likely to be drawn to the individual. If the individual is difficult, ungenerous, unkind, and if we cannot let the halo of love cover over the faults, continuing to do the labor of care is so much harder to do, and perhaps impossible to do well. The best we may be able to do is going through the motions and without the needed attention and affect of concern. And this is the sort of care we all dread. Given a fully normative conception of care, my terms, it's really not care at all. For under a normative conception of care, the cared for must feel cared for, must feel as if there is attention that has a benevolent interest in her. What love can do is sustain the commitment to the other's well-being when our own well-being threatens to be compromised by the strains of caregiving. A sense of duty can also prompt us to carry on, given the taxing nature of caregiving, especially long-term caregiving. But a sense of duty may make the actions we do to benefit the other fall short of the emotional connection to another we expect in a caring relationship. Another element that conspires to evoke or inspires the element of love is the embodied nature of much caregiving. If the care we provide it consists mostly of managing another's books or making appointments, such hands-off care can just as well be carried out without a strong emotional attachment. Duty, honesty, competence, trustworthiness, and reliability suffice. But if another is to touch my body, indifference on the part of the caregiver feels objectifying. Tenderness in touching the body of another has something of the feel of love. We don't need full-blown love, but we do need full-blown concern that normally attaches itself to deep affective connection, to that transformative power that love possesses. It's a transformative power that banishes or overrides feelings of disgust that are usual to experience with certain sorts of bodily contact that caring often requires. Care as love needs to be stripped. Care as love needs to be love stripped of sensual desire, however, not necessarily of the pleasure of the sensual contact with another, but only of the consuming desire that characterizes a sexual love. Perhaps the most prominent role that love plays in care is as a motivator. It's perhaps the prime reason that care is spoken of as a labor of love. When we love someone, we normally wish that person well. We normally wish for the person to thrive, to flourish, to have a good life, one in which we hopefully have a place. We normally not only wish for the person to flourish, we will that person to flourish. That is, our wish is not merely wishful. We have a commitment to seeing to it that the person thrive. Care, as I've suggested, has as its end the flourishing of another. Love, except in some perverted forms of love, and I don't know to what extent you discussed this, has the other's flourishing, that is good love, not perverted love, has as the other's flourishing as not an aim as such, but as a part of a positive affect we have for the other. We wish to preserve the other. We see a good inherent in the other's being, in the other's happiness. Our empathetic identification with the other is such that our happiness resides in the happiness of the other, at least in part. Their cares, in the sense of their needs, aims, goals, become ours to foster. All these attitudes are commensurate with and support care. Thus, love motivates care, because care is the realization of all these aspects of another's flourishing. Our part in helping the other to flourish, and the other's flourishing as part of our own flourishing. We do the care work for our children, for example, insofar as our love for our children makes their happiness and well-being a central component of our own happiness, our own flourishing. We care for a valued or loving spouse, parent, friend, or lover for much the same reason. Our love motivates us to seek out the resources we need, the competencies that are required, the patience and fortitude we need to do what can be extended and difficult caring that can interfere with other ambitions or needs that we have. It is this motivational aspect of love which spurs us to do what we can to help another flourish, to keep another from pain and distress, to in some way improve the life of another, that we hope to harness for the purposes of solidarity with our fellow humans and our time fellow creatures. But this motivational aspect of love requires some other aspects of the affinity of love and care that I have already spoken of. The attention to the particularity of the other, their needs and wants, the transformative power of love to help us gloss over the rough edges of another's personality, to see the other through somewhat rose-tinted glasses, to enable empathetic understanding of the other, both their sufferings and their joys. Yet love is frequently insufficient as the sole requisite to good care. There is an overinvestment, there can be an overinvestment in the other's well-being that may cause us to care too much. But if we care too much, do we really care at all in a fully normative sense? Do we care well? I would argue not. When we're overinvested in the other's well-being, we are too likely to project onto the other our own needs and desires rather than allow ourselves to bracket these sufficiently to see what it is that the other truly needs. And this, I suggest, can be a problem if we have a politics of love, where that kind of overinvestment that we see in the other in personal love is played out or is used as an excuse to direct others in ways that we want to see them directed, rather than in ways that as part of their own flourishing. But this kind of overinvestment, this kind of caring too much, it's the story of the child who says, I have to wear a scarf when my mother is cold. That the mother is cold is one indication that the child may be cold, but it might be that the child is far more tolerant of certain temperature than the mother, and what is cold for her may not be cold for the child. In fact, the more deeply two persons are entwined, the thicker the love relationship, the more porous the boundaries between self and other, the greater the danger of conflating one's own needs and the desires of another. Love may be a strong motivator of care, but is far from a guarantor of care. Thus far, in speaking of love as a motivating force for care, I've had in mind the model of the relatively intimate relationship of lovers, parent-child, spouses, adult parent-child, or two or more friends. But one of the less person-specific love not for a particular other, but for a generalized other, or the love that urges us to love the stranger, to love our fellow citizens, even to love our enemies. Is such love a motivator of care? I believe it is, and if love has a place in politics at all, it is largely as a motivator for the care of another, as the emotion can underwrite the caring about care, which I've spoken of earlier as a basis for politics of care. I've talked about the ways in which we can say that care needs or evokes or is motivated by love. Now, does love need care? I would suggest that care is more necessary to love than love is to care. Love without the commitment to care for and about the other, to do the work of caring for the other when the need arises, is thin and brittle. A lover who walks away from the beloved when the beloved needs care is a poor lover indeed. And I think this bears directly on the question of the politics of love. What it suggests to me is that a politics of love has to be first and foremost a politics of care. It has to be a politics that puts the value of care and an ethic of care at the center. This means not that we each have to care for whosoever needs care, but that would be all-consuming. What it means is that the political institutions we put in place need to be institutions that care for people and that treat people in a caring manner. Putting such institutions at the heart of our politics means we prioritize the needs of the dependent and the vulnerable, that we ensure that in giving care to another, the caregiver is not exploited in her need or willingness to care, nor can the caregiver in her role as carer exploit or dominate those who are in her care. It means that the burdens of care, or what I call elsewhere the burdens of inevitable human dependency, are not merely the private concern of those who find themselves in need of care or in need of giving care, but that these burdens are distributed and shared by society as a whole. It means that the society is not a contractual agreement between those who are equally empowered and equally situated. For those who are not so empowered and situated are not then at the table where the terms of the distribution of benefits and burdens are determined. In other writings, I've elaborated on many of these thoughts and have enumerated what I've called a public ethic of care. So, in the end, I want to say that a politics of love needs a public ethic of care. That's it.
Thank you.
Yes,
still here. Still here, so. We were just on mute, so you might not have heard the initial applause.
Okay.
We're just running over time, but we've got time for some quick questions that hopefully you'll hear, and if not, I can facilitate. Thank you so much. So questions. I know people to get away, but do we have a quick question or two?
People are probably so exhausted at the end of the conference that probably don't have very much to.
One question that I have is, when you talk about institutions placing care at the centre of what they do, do you have existing institutions in mind, or new institutions that you think realise that value of care?
Well, we do have institutions that are devoted to care. They tend to be very underfunded. Of course, there's the whole medical profession, and the extent to which it's devoted to care as opposed to the scientific exercise of that medicine is another question. Care is often seen as the little orphan to the technology of medicine. Things like social welfare programs are, again, these are, they're viewed as the safety net, but I don't want to see them as the safety net. They should be central. No, they should be at the heart of our political institutions. We need to have political institutions and a political mindset that doesn't give the crumbs to the vulnerable and the dependent. Well, they'll build ramps for the disabled if we can afford it. No, the ramps for the disabled are primary. That's where you start. You start with the needs of children, with the needs of disabled people, with the needs of those who cannot care for themselves. Because as far as I'm concerned, I've made the argument in numerous works, that's what we essentially need society for. That's the primary reason we have social institutions. But somewhere along the line, that notion has gotten very lost. And in part because it's been privatized. It can no longer be privatized if women are going to be in the public sphere. It can no longer be privatized, I think, as we grow older and have older people who need care. And it oughtn't to be privatized because it's not the right thing to do. It's
Great, thank you. We've got one question from Lynn Siegel here.
I loved your talk and your writing. The only query I have is that we are all vulnerable and we are all dependent, and in your talk and writing I somehow get the impression that, using the model of children, that only certain people are vulnerable and dependent. But actually, often those who see themselves as most autonomous and independent are totally reliant on others in every way to meet their needs and service them. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is that we absolutely need to care as well as to be cared for. And that interaction between the carer and the cared for is sometimes overlooked and played down when we think of dependency in terms of need and one person's vulnerability rather than a mutual vulnerability and mutual need to both care and be cared for.
right. No, I entirely agree. We are all dependent to some extent all of our lives, and in certain periods of our life we're more totally dependent. No one in an advanced industrial society actually is self-reliant. It's a myth, it's called the myth of independence. But what we have built our institutions to do, and our mindset, is to make those dependencies invisible. We need to make them visible. We need to be aware of them, as you say. I don't think there's a difference between those who are dependent at point A and those who are less dependent in point A, because in point B or C or X somewhere down the line, it may be reversed or it may never be reversed. It may just be that we have two very dependent people. We're all, dependency is part of our human possibility. We need structures to care for that. And we have structures that care for certain kinds of dependency. We have structures that care for the dependency we have on food, for example. Not that that's done with, in a truly equitable fashion, but we do have structures to deal with that. And so that makes it rather invisible until we don't have enough money to pay food. So I don't disagree with you at all. Yeah.
Thank you.